Well, welcome everyone. My name is Chris McClain, and this is the Iowa Gravel Series Podium Podcast. We have a fantastic show for you today. We've got Julie Boer. Did I pronounce that right?
Got it.
Perfect. And Jessie Combs, both amazing racers from Team Prairie Bloom. They recently podiumed at our 2022 Preparation Pisgah race. Jessie with a fantastic time. We'll get into that a little bit later at first place. And Julie coming in third. Our second place podium winner, Kimmai. She couldn't make it today, but we still got a great show. Jessie and Julie are both in Omaha in that area and part of the Prairie Bloom team. And Julie is the founder of Prairie Bloom. So we're really excited to get in, have a little conversation, learn about these folks, and talk a little bit about Prairie Bloom and the Iowa Gravel Series. How does that fit in? How can it maybe help folks as they're getting into gravel and trying to meet their goals? So Jessie, Julie, thank you so much for being here.
For sure.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of get into that first thing first and learn a little bit about you. Maybe we'll start with Jessie, only because she was our podium winner.
She deserves it. She needs to go first.
Yeah. Learn a little bit about Jessie, about where you are. How did you get into gravel and cycling in general? Curious about that. Did you grow up in Omaha?
Yep, grew up in Omaha. I just remembered this yesterday. I bought my first bike actually from CycleWorks because they're one of the people that put on Gravel Worlds, right?
Yeah.
So just a hybrid Trek that I got back in college. I went to school in Lincoln, and then 2007 I moved to Chicago and lived there for about 3 years and commuted via bike quite often out in the city. And actually had that bike stolen at one point.
Well, I don't want to make an insensitive joke about Chicago, but it seems a little on brand.
Yes, it's very common. Literally in a huge bike rack. I left work, went out to go find it, and I was like, I swear my bike was right there. And I walked around for a good 10 minutes, and then long story short, it was one of the catalysts to get me back to Omaha. I just kind of had it and loved my time there. But when I got back to Omaha, none of my friends rode bikes, so I decided to just buy my first road bike, joined some ladies trek group, trek rides back in the day.
Yeah.
When Jolene Holland lived here, she worked at Green Street and would do a bunch of rides too. So I met Megan Delotto, who was married to Raffle Delotto. Everyone knows Raffle, so yeah, good friends of hers. And so got into road riding back in 2011. Probably 2 or 3 years after that, I got a mountain bike. It was an old 2x26er. Shortly after, crashed at Swanson, broke my collarbone there, and was scared to get back on. I did get back on it for a little bit, but then probably in I don't know when, I just kind of got out of cycling for a little bit, for several years, for whatever reason. I don't know. Everyone was just kind of taking breaks. I just kind of got out of it, and then last year is when I found Prairie Bloom. I don't even know how I found the group, Julie. I think it was just on Instagram or
Facebook, who knows?
Yeah, I just found it on Instagram and I just joined a ride. And then I remember the first ride, you weren't on the first club ride I went on. It was when they were still on Wednesday nights. It was super hot. It was like 20 miles. I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And so yeah, rode with them all summer. Discovered gravel riding just from riding with them. I got my gravel bike in October.
Wow, that is recent.
Yep, just got it last October. And then Julie organized something through Arkfeld Acres. I don't know if that was an intro, whatever that was.
Yeah, we just had like an intro to mountain biking, just like try it out.
Yeah, and I still had my old 26er, so I brought that out there, and I was like, I think I might want to get back into this again. And so then January, so I make a joke. I got bought up January 2nd. So I got one bike in 2021 and one bike in 2022. So I was like one bike per year. So
you're on a great trend if you're looking to have like a full quiver.
Yep, exactly. So I got a stump jumper, the real deal. I mean, so my first love right now is mountain biking. I love it. It's crazy how much confidence you build through that. And and I've told Julie this before, it is transferred over to gravel. Like just I said something to somebody today. I'm like, I think the reason it makes gravel riding easier is because I've learned how to suffer longer because I've done the marathon categories at the Nebraska Off-Road Series. So it's just, you ride for 3 hours as hard as you can, how many laps you can get. So
Yeah.
I think it's just taught me to suffer longer. So, but yeah, I've just been riding a lot with these gals, and it's just been nice to find like-minded individuals, and they're not just my bike friends. I feel like they're my real friends, not on and off the bike. So, yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell. But
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like you've had quite a resume builder here. I mean, between stolen bike and broken collarbone,
yeah,
really you've hit the big bingo items.
I think those are the big points. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can bounce back from those, you're doing pretty good. And so, well, I guess that kind of gives us a nice little segue to talk a bit about Prairie Bloom and where Julie comes in, being the founder of that, and how that got started and how she got her start in cycling. So, Julie, what are you an Omaha native, or
No,
are you
I'm
a transplant to Omaha?
Transplant. I'm from Mexico. I moved here when I was about 7 years old, to the bustling metropolis of Wood River, Nebraska, which is big. Really just kind of like, I've always been on my bike since I was a little kid, and then just zoomed around town and didn't even know that it was a sport or that people actually did this until I probably moved to Omaha and went to my first crit. And I was like, oh, like people actually do this, because I'd been just riding my bike casually. I think I'd done maybe a taco ride or two, and that was the extent of it. I'd been just on the paved trails, riding from home, not really doing anything crazy other than just, I guess, spending energy. So yeah, it was my first crit. It was in 2020. I just went to see it because a friend of mine was racing in it. He had been trying to get us to go out there forever, and I had no interest because it was over my head. He was a really serious cyclist. I was like, I don't understand any of the words that you're saying. He was talking about FTPs, etc. So I just always tuned him out, but somehow he talked me into going to this crit. And as I was sitting there, I was like, man, I've been riding my bike for a while, for a long time, but I never knew that this world existed. And just watching other teams and their camaraderie and just seeing them interact and how much fun they were having, and just seeing a different discipline than something I didn't even know existed, right? So that I went home and I Googled like cycling clubs, cycling teams in Omaha for women. I found nothing. Then I started looking at the other teams, and I really didn't see any other women in those teams either. And I'm really good about, if I don't find a community, I just make one, I guess. So I started just reaching out to some friends that I knew kind of like through Run Club, because I was primarily a runner. And I said, hey, would you guys be interested in this? Because we had all kind of been in the same crit, just watching. And there was a lot of enthusiasm. So then just with like maybe a handful of us, we just decided, let's just Google things, start researching what this is about, and just wing it. And that's literally what we did. And somehow, some way, the group started growing. We started getting people that had been cycling for a while, but maybe didn't find a community. So we started with maybe like 12 people, like at the very beginning. And I think we're at 85 now, 85 members, which is pretty insane.
Yeah, that really is. And when you say 12, I mean, was this just a casual group, or was this already starting to form as that Prairie Bloom name and things at that point?
No, it was just a casual group. It was practically all my friends from Run Club, from Scriptown Run Club. That's pretty much what it was.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really anything. So there really weren't any like cyclists in our group at the start. So that actually is like the most mind-blowing thing to me right now, is because we have a race team now. Like that's one of the things that I'd wanted since day one, but I didn't know if it was going to be a possibility, just because like I didn't know the first thing about cycling and racing. So yeah, I mean, that's just thinking about the evolution of it is kind of hard to believe.
Yeah.
Like 2020 went from really not knowing even that cycling was like a legit sport, or knowing any cyclists really, to just now being in a community where like that's really all I'm in right now. It's like most of my friends are cyclists. That's how I spend most of my time. Like that's life now.
It's fun how it takes those kind of different turns. Did you anticipate Prairie Bloom to be like a crit racing team, or was there a point where you're like, no, maybe we're doing other racing, or maybe we're another thing? Like, what would you describe as this community is built? Where have they shifted? You mentioned the running team and everything, so maybe it's a fitness focus, but what really kind of evolved to kind of coalesce this team or this group to keep coming together? What was the focus?
So because I only knew of crit racing, that was the only cycling thing I'd ever watched. Yes, that was the goal. And then very quickly I realized like, hey, I don't really think I like going around in circles really fast, especially after seeing a lot of people crash and break bones and bikes. I was like, maybe that's not my jam. But as I started learning more about cycling and just kind of finding our place, I realized how much I didn't know about cycling. And so we started essentially hosting all these learning opportunities. So if I didn't know something, I would say like, if I don't know this, other people probably don't know it either. So we started hosting clinics in like bike maintenance. We've now hosted 3 mountain bike clinics, and then we've hosted crit and bike handling clinics, bike packing clinics, just a lot of other learning opportunities. And in addition, last year, I think we had 2 rides a week, which is a lot. We had our social ride, which was like an intro ride for people who had never ridden on roads before. That was especially important to me because that's kind of like the world I came from, right? I had just been riding on just the safe streets of my small town that I grew up in college in Wayne, Nebraska. So coming to Omaha was a little bit harrowing, trying to figure out where to bike safely. So just sticking to trails, I knew that we would be gathering a lot of people that were kind of coming from that background, but I had recently just gotten off road and started cycling more on road, and then realized like, hey, this is a lot of fun. We're seeing a lot of new places. Like I want to bring more people into that. So doing a lot of road cycling was kind of like my first love, and I still love it, but we are in Nebraska and there are lots of gravel roads, which is kind of like what got me into gravel riding was going on roads and going, I want to take that road, but my tires won't do that. So I need something else. And that got me into it. So I started gravel riding last year as well. So I think it was around March or April.
Wow. I'm just so impressed because watching like the level of the bike handling, and we'll get into Pisgah here in a little bit. I want to hear Jessie's story and how she got into Prairie Bloom a little bit. I think this is a good segue. But I want to say that so my background is I design training for enterprises. Like I'm an instructional designer. I do all of that sort of stuff, and so I kind of geek out on learning theory and things like that. And what I love about what I'm hearing a little bit from Prairie Bloom is this community of practice, like this team, and how quickly you can learn when you have a team working together, when you have a group of like-minded people that can quickly share information, you practice together, you can gel together. I mean, because I've seen a fair number of teams and a fair number of especially women riders on the Iowa Gravel Series, and I was just really impressed with like what Prairie Bloom brought to Pisgah in terms of like just fitness and camaraderie and working together. So we'll get into that more, but I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, this is what a good community of practice is, what a good team does for you. It just expedites your learning so quickly. So Jessie, we've kind of heard from Julie a little bit about how Prairie Bloom got started, but what was your experience coming into this group? Were you there in the beginning, or did you kind of like come in a little bit more in the middle after it already formed?
I mean, I think you gals hadn't been formed for too long. I think it was last May or June I did my first social ride.
So I think probably less than a year after I was being formed is when you probably found us really early on.
Yeah. And so I think it was May or June I did a social ride, and then I did a club ride, and then it just kind of went from there.
So are you weekly? From that point, were you pretty much kind of every week with them?
Yeah, I think as much as I could. I think I tried to make every Wednesday night ride as much as I could. Things come up, but
had Had you ridden with, or had you been in a club environment before? Was this something that you kind of like were familiar with, or was this a new experience for you?
I mean, so my boyfriend Colin is on a team, so I was somewhat familiar with that. He's on Team Chaos, so I kind of knew some of the, logistics and what it takes and all that stuff. So his is more of a formal club racing team, which Prairie Bloom at the time wasn't that. So I was just looking to get back into it, make some friends. I love riding bikes, but I much prefer to ride with other people. I rarely just want to go out and ride my bike myself. I'll do it, but I just wanted to ride with other people. So yeah, I just rode with them and sold a few old bikes, upgraded a few more, and yeah. So
sounds like Colin. He was maybe guiding you a little bit to kind of.
No, I will not give him credit.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
No, he loves to take credit for things, but I'm not going to let him take credit for this. But I did ride bikes when I would ride bikes with him, but it was just not the same. He's way faster. It wasn't always fun for him, in the beginning when I was getting back into it, just because I just wasn't as fast. So it was nice to just find ladies closer to the same level to ride with. And I mean, basically it's just different riding with someone who's super fast and you're just not. So
well, yeah, no, okay, again, I promise, well, actually I don't promise, I hope that this is my last learning theory geeky thing, but sure. there is a notion in it's more built out of a Russian philosopher. His name was Vygotsky, and he'd call it zone of proximal development. Like we develop and we can build so much better when we're very close to that next level. But taking big jumps can be fairly demoralizing, can be really a challenge for us as we're trying to grow in either a skill or an area of knowledge. And so having, again, like a close group that you're not feeling like you're always getting dropped or whatever, but you can stay with that group, that can be a good thing as well. So yeah, for sure. Again, the learning theory geek in me is having all sorts of fun with this. So maybe let's transition and let's talk very specifically about Prairie Bloom. Like, what is the structure today? If someone was like, oh, this sounds kind of cool, a bunch of amazing women getting together riding bikes, where do they get started? What does that look like? And what's kind of, what are you offering so people know a little bit about what they're getting into?
Yeah. So because I was a former designer and I really kind of like the marketing aspect, I knew that I needed a logo, kits, and a website first and foremost, above all else. So
you always got to start with the look,
and an Instagram account, of course, to share all our cool photos. So that kind of funneled it a little bit easier, because then when I had the website established, then people could go and learn, like, okay, I saw this name, I can look it up on Instagram, there's a website. And then we had just things listed like, here's what's required to join. Really early on, we decided to do like a membership model. So I think right now it's $25 a year, which is like nothing, to join the group. And then, I would send out like newsletters, and then that would get you access to like all of these learning opportunities, all the clinics, like access to mountain bikes if you didn't have one, by way of the Bike Union, which is now Astute Coffee, like just a lot of resources. So we'd have people just go through the website, fill out an application. I would ask questions like, what type of riding do you do? Is it mountain, paved, commute, like gravel, road? What's your experience level? And really for me, I learned really on when we were hosting some of these rides that you'd get all types of riders that showed up. But it made it easier in my head to plan for these rides if I knew who exactly was coming out. So for example, if I had a gravel ride planned and I knew somebody who applied, said, I don't have a gravel bike and I've never done this before, but they signed up to do this 40-mile club ride on gravel, I would get a hold of them and say, like, did you get a gravel bike? And they would say, like, no. And I go, this is probably not gonna great. So just it made it easier for me, having the membership model too, just getting to know exactly who was going to be showing up to these rides. Our social rides are open to everybody. And those are they used to be weekly. They are once a month now. And our social rides were open to like anybody because they were like very entry level. But our club rides, I wanted to make sure and protect them a little bit. Like, to make sure everybody had fun. So if, like I said, if somebody showed up with a road bike on this like 40-mile gravel ride, they'd have a miserable time, flat out, like immediately. So yeah, that's like one of the biggest things is just like putting all that information out there for people to find, and all the necessary channels. But one of the things I kind of wanted to go back to, because you were talking about learning theory. I knew really early on, also when I started researching for race teams and clubs in Omaha, that the experience level needed to be pretty high, I think, before you were invited to join or even thought about joining, right? You had to be a pretty legit rider already.
Oh yeah, there's kind of like, you must be this tall to get in and be on the team and everything like that. You kind of prove yourself or be at some level. Yeah. That's common.
I wanted to make sure, and I think this is actually different because and the reason why we're an all women's team is, or female identifying team, is really because the learning process is a lot different. We, I think, are a lot more social and are a lot more patient. Our egos are a lot lower. Like when we go out on a ride, we're having fun and we don't mind waiting for people. We don't mind doing any of that. Like we're just a little bit more approachable. So I think that's one of the biggest things that's kind of given us a leg up, and why it's allowed to grow quite a bit is because if you show up to a ride, even if maybe your fitness level isn't there, if you're way in the back, like we're not going to leave you. Like if we get ahead, we're going to wait for you. Like it's
and we saw, like I just want to, I apologize. I want to jump in there because this is actually something that I thought was really important. And we have like pictorial photograph evidence of this because on the Pisgah race, there's some killer climbs for this area. We're not the Rocky Mountains, like, don't get me wrong, but for Iowa, for Nebraska, I think we have some of the most challenging hills on that climb, and they're beautiful, really neat areas. When dust aside, if we've had a recent rain and everything, it's a little bit more manageable. But there's this really neat picture that I love that one of our photographers, it's Todd Ramsey's son, Will, I believe, if I get the right name. Sorry if I messed that up. He took this great picture of Kimmai, I believe, sitting at the top of the most brutal hill that's in the area. It's 138th and Fulton. Like it's the only place where consistently every time I ride that ride, my Garmin says, "Congratulations, you have a new max heart rate." Like it's super steep, but there's this beautiful picture of Kimmai and Jessie coming up to the top, and Kimmai waiting for Jessie to continue on. And I was like, I mean, this is a race. They're competing, but this was really, really cool and just a really beautiful moment that we captured there. And I feel like that kind of fits into this ethos that you're sharing on what Prairie Bloom is all about.
And we were waiting for Julie too, but her thighs were getting ready to explode. Like
my quads had ballooned to twice their size, normal size. So I was like down there waiting for them to shrink back down before I could ride again.
There were so many cramps on that ride. I want to ask you, because I have a slight, it's a theory, maybe it's a superstition, I don't know. Did you fill up your bottles at the aid station? Did you have Gatorade, or did you have just water, or did you bring your own stuff?
I had Scratch, but I'm notorious for under hydrating. Okay. Every time I think I have enough hydration, I don't. So that was really on me. But also it was that flat stretch before that. That's where I was like, I need to watch myself, because flats are not, I love hills. Like climbing hills is like my thing. That's the thing I love.
That's how her and I are different.
Yeah. So like Jessie, like flats, she's like going hard. And me, I'm like, man, I don't have enough, like my legs are not strong enough to like retain that much power. But I don't know, hills I can do. But I had been pushing really hard on that flat stretch to keep up with them. And that's, like that was on me, because that was beyond what I should have been doing. And so by the time I got to the hill, I was destroyed.
Well, it's a challenging course, and I'm the same way. I love the climbs. That's one of the reasons why I built that course or put that course together, is because I grew up in the West, and it's funny, like the straights, they trash me, but you suddenly get me on a climb, and I'm like, oh wait, I know what to do. Here we go, 300 watts, no problem. Can I put 300 watts out on a flat? Not for my life. Like I cannot. But you put me on a climb for an hour, and you're like, I'm like 250. Here we go, no problem. Off I go.
But Kimmai and Jessie, though, you guys can do it. I almost said Kimmai. I think that's your new name.
Me and Kimmai, Kimmai. That's right. When we pull you on the flats, we'll be like, okay, form Kimmai. Here we go.
Yes.
With our powers combined,
they have such strong legs, and on the flat, they're just so strong. I should know better than try to keep up with them. That's on me.
And then who all had the QOMs all day on every hill?
Until the last one where I died.
Okay.
Until that last one, then I was like, I didn't even get to climb it. I didn't even get to try it because I got the cramps right at the base of the hill, and I was like, no, this is my thing.
We're gonna go back.
So I told Jessie we're going back so I can try it without the cramps and see how that goes.
Absolutely.
And not 40 miles ridden before it.
Not 40 miles ridden before, or at least not like 12 before ridden at like maximum.
We'll warm up with like 10 and then try it.
That's perfect. Yeah. So we'll be back. We'll be back to try.
Awesome. Sounds like a great idea for a club ride. I want to make sure this is kind of clear. So you have social rides that are once a month with Prairie Bloom, and then you send out, is it weekly, or how many club rides are there generally in the schedule during the season?
So, I mean, right now it fluctuates a little bit just because the race weekends, right? So on race weekends, we try not to have a club ride, but typically on a Sunday morning, we'd go out on a club ride at 8 a.m. And I used to be really good about sending weekly newsletters until that got like to be a little bit too much, because it turns out life is busy and chaotic, and it's a lot. So we really organize on Slack, was where I post most of it. But yeah, I think we're pretty consistent on just going like the weekly rides, of course, weather permitting, and then if there's no race. But those tend to alternate between gravel and road, just because some people don't have gravel bikes. I think that's kind of the hardest part, is not everybody has a gravel bike, and not all bikes can be on a road, but not all bikes can be on a gravel road.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if we'll get to the point where that's, at least for this area, that it's the other way around, where everybody's like, no, you just start with your gravel bike. But
yeah, I think that's how it should probably be around here. Now, every time I get somebody asking me, like, I'm going to go get a bike, I'm going to get a gravel bike. You can ride on a road, but just get a gravel bike.
Yeah. Well, that might also be a good transition here as we talk a little about the series, because we just came off of Gravel Worlds. Is the season kind of rolling off for you at this point? Was Gravel Worlds kind of the big thing for the club, or is there any other big races that as a club or you're individually kind of looking at?
I think that was the biggest one that we had as a club. I think we're all signed up for other smaller races or other races, but that was like the one that I think a lot of a group was signed up for, was Gravel Worlds.
Awesome. Yep. Well, then let's stop on Gravel Worlds real quick. I know you're both there. I got to see it. I was volunteering, just handing out rags and, filling up bottles and everything, and got some fun stories. Got to see everyone. Really enjoyed that. So I'm hoping to race next year. But tell me what your experience was. I think you both did the 75. Okay. Yeah. Well, so what was the 75 like for you?
Jessie, you go first.
Okay. No, it was good. It ended up being the longest ride I've ever done. So that was, I think the longest ride before that was Grounded back in June. That was like 61 miles. So that was a great accomplishment yesterday.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It was crazy. That start with I think they had like 700 some people for the 75. I don't know. It was insane. But it went by really fast. I was chasing Carly Thompson the whole time, and I don't know if I looked up and looked around enough like I should have, but I did plan to party pace, but I'm finding that if there's someone that's fast that I can chase, I like to push myself and go for it. So Carly is a seasoned cyclist, and I look up to her greatly. She just came off doing 140 miles last weekend in Steamboat. So yesterday was like a recovery ride for her. So she is super. I tease her about that. But it was a great course. Honestly, I don't want to say it felt easier than Pisgah, but it kind of did. I don't know. Would you agree, Julie? I don't know. It was hilly for sure, but like
rollers, but there was nothing near them.
It was all doable. Everything was doable.
Hills.
Yeah, and
you had good breaks. Like you'd have some straights to rest, and then but it was an awesome event. Like I get why they make such a big deal about it. Seems super organized. Yeah, it was really great. I had a great time.
Yeah, I really look up to those guys. They're doing good things. I really appreciate the work that they did to make sure that there were lots of different folks in gravel. I think that's one of the things that I really love. When I started the gravel series, I was like, look, I want these races, I want these rides to feel like you're looking around at any population of people. Like it shouldn't just be, white old dudes in spandex. And so they're doing that. And that's one of the biggest things where I'm like, yes, I will go and volunteer and I will give my time. I brought my son with me so he could see that as well. And so that it's like, hey, look, this is a different type of world than where a lot of my experience was just hanging out with the guys, climbing mountains in Utah. And then I moved out to the Bay Area and was out there. And again, it was just a bunch of dudes. And so how awesome it is to have like that diversity and have everybody there, every type, everything. Like you saw everything, and it was fantastic. So I really appreciate that. Julie, how was your you said you weren't racing, but how was your race?
It was great. So one of the things that I recognized really early on, especially I think after Pisgah, is I'm not in riding shape as I was last year. Last year I rode so much more, and I had already, by the time Pisgah rolled around, I had a couple 100Ks and 100-mile gravel race under my belt. This year, that was my longest ride of the year. And yeah, life got a little bit too chaotic and I just haven't been writing. So I think Pisgah destroyed me a little bit. And I made it a point to say, like, for gravel worlds, I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm just going to ride and I'm going to take my time and I'm just going to look around and do all the things. And I don't want to feel like garbage afterwards. I don't want to feel like garbage for a week. So I rode in a way where I think at like mile 50, I told myself, I'm like, I could do 100 miles today and I'd be okay with that. Like I'd feel great. So when I got done, I felt like $1 million. Like I was telling you earlier, I went out on a hard effort ride this morning and I had no soreness, nothing. So it was just a different experience than like the week prior to, which I had actually raced, versus this week where I said, I'm just going to enjoy it. And I think we stopped at an aid station and talked to friends and had snacks for like 10 to 15 minutes, which I would never ever would have done during a race. But that just kind of like changed the mentality of it. And I go, you know what, this is cool too. When I'm in better shape, I will push harder, but this year is not the year that I can maintain that without completely trashing myself.
Well, and I
so
think
try to be smart.
Right, it is being smart because you think of that mentality of an athlete, and I think the early younger athletes, and there's some good things about this, is it's always go go go, more, fast fast fast, and you really can destroy yourself. But fitness isn't just a linear path. It really does. It not only needs or not only does, but like it needs to have these ebbs and flows. You need to take those times to break and recover, and you do come back stronger because that's how your body builds strength, is through those recovery periods. So I mean, so much of that athletic or athlete journey is learning, when do I need to go hard, when do I not need to go hard, and then hopefully getting to the point where you can design for that. And this is a bit of a shameless plug, and I feel a slight need to defend Pisgah because it is my one of my favorite races. It's one of the ones that I actually really do hope kind of grows. And so I want to go back because last year, 2021, Julie, you did the Glenwood Gravel Grinder, which is on the series. I'm curious, how would you describe that one? Since you haven't done any of the other races, but it all being the same, all kind of being close to Omaha. How would you describe Glenwood first, and then I want to come back to Pisgah and talk about this, like how do you balance these different races when you've got Gravel Worlds and Unbound and things. So what was your experience at Glenwood last year?
So I was terrified of Glenwood initially because I'd done Les Hills Enduro, the 100K prior to that, which was very hilly. And so I was expecting similar, and it was rollers. And I would actually like compare it a little bit more to what Gravel World's course was. It was definitely rollers, but it wasn't, there weren't any climbs like Pisgah had. So I thought it was a little bit more approachable in that regard. But but it was still challenging. Like you're still riding in that area, and whether you like it or not, there's going to be hills. But I do remember there's quite a long stretch towards the end, which I was not a fan of, again, because flats are not my strength.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say it's still challenging. It's still a challenging course, but it's very approachable. I think that if you ride around here, there's no hill that you'll approach that you haven't probably already done something similar to that around. I guess if you're right in the Omaha, Iowa area, where Pisgah is obviously I think on a different level. And you described it I think at some point during the race, saying like it's different because you get to the top of the climb and you think you're done and can go downhill, but actually you keep going up. And I go, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And most other ones are just not like that.
Yeah, it is a little bit different. And so yeah, Pisgah is one of those ones where I think you definitely you do. Pisgah is definitely a challenge, but I think it's also a great way to prepare folks. And you haven't done Steamboat. Have you done any races out in Colorado or some of these bigger climbs? Rebecca's Private Idaho.
I haven't done any of those. I think like the really furthest one away, and because it's not that far from Colorado, is Rubidoux, Quick and Dirty, which is now Rubidoux Rendezvous. That's really like the only one that I've done that is a little bit further out, and I don't think that one even was remotely close to that. I think it was like half the elevation gain if you like took it mile for mile of Pisgah. It had one killer climb, but everything else was not too bad.
Jessie, have you done any other races out farther west? Maybe
my first race was in April, the Swanson Shootout mountain bike race. That was my first bike race ever. So I don't think I've done anything outside of local stuff.
Yet.
Not
yet,
but yes. No, everything's been local for me. So
okay. Well, because one of the things I imagine, and as I've done races, I haven't done a lot of the big Leadvilles or the steamboats yet, but I've ridden out there a lot, done a lot of touring through the Zion area, through the Moab area. I grew up doing a lot of those things, and so a lot of when I look at Pisgah, when I love it so much, is I see it as hopefully an opportunity to prepare people to go out and do those races. It's about the closest you can get if you live in this area to go and get time on the hill, to have this experience of having a really long climb, and then you keep climbing, which it's not the gravel seas, right? I think I described it as the gravel tsunami.
Yeah, there you go. That's good.
So if you were to give, if you're looking at your schedule for next year, you're thinking about 2023 and your season, and you have experience with Glenwood and Pisgah, and I think Silver City is kind of a little bit closer to that roller feel, even more so. Like Silver City is flatter than Pisgah or Glenwood. How would you plan it out if you knew that you wanted to go out and do something bigger like Steamboat or Gravel Worlds or even Unbound down in Kansas? How would you maybe use these races to your advantage to prepare for those?
I think that it's early enough in this season too, because I feel like a lot of these are in the fall. I would keep putting this one on my list, just like as a test to see if I'm even ready, like it's just anybody, especially when you think about how many people cramped up that hill. So it makes you just kind of think like, oh, maybe I need to work on my nutrition better, and maybe I need to work on pacing a little better. It just fits so well into some of the bigger races coming up. So I guess for next year, I think this would be just another excellent test to see like if you're ready for any of the other ones, any longer distances.
Well, I think that's why I think you signed up for Pisgah just like I did, just as a good ride before Gravel Worlds. I mean, that's really why I signed up for it. And I'd never done an Iowa Gravel Series race either. A couple people signed up for it, and I'd heard of the Glenwood Gravel and stuff, but I loved it. I was telling Julie, I was like, I liked Pisgah too because it was like more chill. There's just good, gives and takes to each one, or pros and cons to Gravel Worlds versus. I liked how it was more chill and just kind of like home base, and even though it was just about as far away, but yeah, it was just kind of a nice precursor to Gravel Worlds, and
it lets you kind of test yourself a little bit against the people that you actually ride with locally, because if you go to any of the bigger races like Gravel Worlds or Steamboat. I mean, you're one of masses, right? You're just like an ant.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pros, so it's hard to see like even how you stack up. Like, man, am I even probably good at this because I came in like mid-pack, etc. And it's kind of nice to see you're like, hey, locally, like, how am I actually doing with everybody else that lives around this area and trains in the same areas, and then maybe he's not a pro and just a regular person just riding around. That part was kind of cool, just because it allowed you to test yourself a little bit more, or at least push a little bit more, especially being relatively new and not knowing as much about race strategies. I don't know. I just kept thinking of it as just a good test, a good practice for all of that.
Yeah. And the Iowa Gravel Series was never like, I don't intend for, I mean, it might happen. And if so, fantastic, but I don't quite see us getting to this point, especially trying to run 5 races in a year, that we're getting to this big festival style event like what you have at Gravel Worlds. And so I see this as a place that, yes, a little bit chiller. We mark the course. Like, if you don't have a GPS, like, there's going to be a sign, or if that GPS fails on you, you're not going to get lost in the middle of nowhere. You can just follow the signs and stuff. So I'm hoping to see that be something that's a helpful entry level to good practice space for these big events that are out there. And but I'm curious from you, like, are we hitting that? Like, is there something I really need to be informed, because I'm just a white dude in spandex, and there's things I don't know that I don't know. So I'm curious to just get some maybe a little advice from you folks before we maybe wrap this up. Like, what can we do to kind of hit on some of those goals? Are we hitting on it? And what do you think?
I think that you guys have, I mean, I've only done 2 of them, right? And I hope I did sign up for Glenwood Gravel Grinder again.
Awesome.
Here. The shorter distance, because I have a wedding to photograph later in the day, so I should probably be responsible and not do the full 100K. But the 2 times that I have done the races, they've been amazing. Just everybody, the camaraderie, just the attention to detail, the fact that we can talk to you, ask questions. I think that's hard to replace, especially like compared to a bigger race. Especially again for being like newer riders, that's a lot more comforting, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, because a lot of these races are uncomfortable, but I think you guys are doing everything right, and especially just embracing growth as it comes too, like not pushing too hard or trying to be something that somebody else is. And just people, I've seen these races keep growing, and I think you're just going to keep getting that momentum, because people hear about them and they say, hey, I signed up for that last year and it was amazing, you should do it too. So in that regard, I think you guys are just hitting the mark.
Well, thank you. Jessie, any thoughts?
Yeah, same. I mean, it was my first one, and I would definitely, if Glenwood Gravel didn't fall on the same day as the Calvin Crest mountain bike race, I would be doing it. But I've gotten to all of them, and I've not gotten on the podium for the ones that I've done, so I gotta see it through. But well, Platte River, I was the only woman who did the marathon, so that was kind of.
That means you're the only one that showed up. That's worthy of the podium.
I've been told never to explain a podium finish.
No, you were out there.
If you win, you win. That like there's no questioning the win.
Yeah. No, I thought it was awesome. Even though I raced really hard at Pisgah, I felt like I saw more of the scenery. If that makes any sense. I don't know why. I might have been really tired yesterday too. I don't know, but
well, I mean, you weren't trying to get around the masses as we were. Like gravel was like the first 10 miles. Like I don't think I saw anything.
It took a while
for it to get around riders.
It took a while for it to spread out. Yeah, for sure. But no, I think it's great. I think it's just good segues to other rides, and just I feel like Julie says, like, cycling is like a big part of my life now. Like that's my weekends. Like I rode super hard yesterday, so today I was like recover mode all day, so but I wouldn't change it. I don't care. Like I just love it, and this is my life. So no, I think I love the small town feel. I loved how you started it in a little park and we hung out afterwards, and so just a different feel. And I think it seemed like you had like riders of all levels doing it, so
Yeah, we have some really good folks that have I mean, everybody is a good folk on it, like everybody's good, but we have some folks that are incredibly talented and amazing athletes that have been on it, which has been a lot of fun. So hopefully also to continue that, and next year I'm hoping to see more teams come out, and I'm hoping to see more juniors, because we're doing some things to encourage that. Well, this has been fantastic. I want to wrap this up just so that we can have our Sunday back and everything. But I want to give you just a huge thanks for talking with me, sharing your stories a little bit, teaching me, and appreciate your insights. So thank you so much, Julie and Jessie. Anything else any shout outs that you want to give as we wrap this up? Thank yous or anything for in your circle?
I just still am picturing Kimmai in my head going up that hill, and just me thinking, how is she doing that? It's like, what? How is she even doing that? So shout out to Kimmai and actually making it to the top of the hill and not getting
Yes.
it.
And really, to everybody else that's starting out too, just like shout out for having the courage to do it. Keep doing it. Keep showing up, because you're going to get faster. It's going to get easier. And it's just going to get more fun if you keep at it.
Yeah, just get started. That's all you got to do.
Words of wisdom. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We'll wrap this one up, and we will catch you later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. Bye-bye.